Over the last couple of videos, we took care of our network call. We have our array of followers. Now we're ready to start building this collection view that you see here. So over the next couple of videos, we're going to be building the cell. We're going to actually be building the collection view, talking about the diffable data source, implementing the search controller, like all that stuff, downloading the images. We got a couple of videos ahead of us, but this first video, we're going to start off with step one, and that is creating our collection view cell. And as you see here, it's actually a relatively simple cell, right? You saw in the design, you have that grid view. Well, the cell is just a square UI image view. We're actually going to create a custom GF avatar image view, and then a title label, which is just the name or the login. So it's a relatively simple cell. So let's get started building that. And I like to build my cells first, just as a side, because I don't know, once I get my table view or collection view going, like I like to have the cell ready to go, right? Because you know, when we're building, we like to test along the way. Well, you can't really test the table view until you have the cell. So that's why I always do the cell first. That said, the downside to doing that is we're going to build this, lay out our UI, and we're not going to be able to like test it or see the fruits of our labor until we get the collection view set up. So we're going to do a lot of code here, but we're not going to get to see it in action until a couple more videos. All right, so we need to create our cell file. So in the custom views, let's go ahead and start this now. New group, and we'll kind of clean this up over time as well, but call this cells. Like I said when I did the organization, usually in my custom views, I have it broken down like buttons, labels, cells, you know, view controllers, whatever it is. So now inside the cells folder, do a new file. It's going to be Cocoa Touch class, hit next. It's going to be of subclass UI, not table view, collection view, man, a lot of collection view cell. There we go. And then I call it the follower, follower cell. I don't know why I never put that other O in follower. So next, create that in cells. So now in our cell file, we have this follower cell blank, ready for us to get started. So the first thing I like to put in here, and I do it because I want to make sure I don't forget it, is to use the reuse ID. If you're familiar with Storyboard, you ever build a table view or a collection view, like you would have to, you know, go set the reuse ID in Storyboard and then make sure that lined up with what you had in your self-road index path. So instead of like setting this in Storyboard, you just set this here, and we're gonna do a static let reuse ID equal, and then call it follower cell. So now that I have that very important piece out of the way, now we go back to how I usually do this, right? I start declaring the UI elements that I'm going to need. And again, back to the design real quick. It's a square UI image view and a title label. So let's create that right now. Let avatar image view equal UI image view. And we're doing this for right now. We're actually going to go create that custom GF avatar image view. But for now, we're going to put that in there. And then let username label equal, it's going to be a GF title label. And again, we're going to use our custom initializer. So the text alignment here is going to be center, right? We want it centered under the picture. So dot center, and then the font will be size 16. So now we have our title label, size 16. We have our elements good to go. Before we move on any further into like laying out the screen, I want to create this GR avatar image view. What we create right now is going to be quite simple, but we're also going to be downloading images onto this avatar image view. That's why we wanted this as a subclass. So anytime we use an avatar image view, we can call download image on it to download, you know, the avatar from the URL that we have. So that's why I want to make this custom. So again, back to custom views, do a command N on the folder, Cocoa Touch class. It's going to be a UI image view. And we call this the GF avatar image view. Hit next, create it. And so just like the other objects we created, we're going to start with our init with frame. We're not doing a custom initializer on this. Super.init, again with frame, we're going to pass in frame there. And here we're going to make sure we call configure, which we don't have yet. So let's do our private func configure. And we're going to fill in our custom configuration code. So we'll call configure, and we should get an error for the storyboard initializer. Yep. By the way, I just kind of call it that. That's not like its official name. It's just what I call it. Okay, now in our configure, let's set up how we want this GF image view. So the first thing you may notice by looking at the design is the corners are rounded. So we want to mess with our corner radius. So layer.corner radius equals 10. Now, the thing is, when you actually put an image in here, like sure, the UI image view corner radius is going to be rounded. It's not 16, it's just 10. I don't know why I did that. However, when you put an image in the UI image view, you have to do eclipse the bounds in order to get the image corner radius. Because what would happen is like, yeah, our UI image view would have the corner radius, but the image would still look like a sharp square unless we did the eclipse to bounds. So clips to bounds, I'm going to set that equal to true. Line these up. And then now we want to set the image, right? And the reason we're setting an image is because we want to give it a placeholder image. Remember in the assets, we had a placeholder image with the little GitHub logo. Just to show you that real quick, in our support folder, go to the assets and the avatar placeholder. So you see we have the little GitHub based on the light and dark mode. This is what we're going to show, while it's loading, or for some reason an image doesn't come back. We still want to show this placeholder rather than just a blank square. So we see we have our placeholder name. I just copied that because we're going to use it by creating a UI image view here. So back to our GF avatar image view, up here, say let placeholder image equal UI image, yeah. And we're just going to initialize it with a string. I'm forgetting an extra I there, little typo action. UI image, get the autocomplete. We want to pass in a string. And then, like I said, I just copied and pasted this from the assets to make sure I don't have a typo. So our image is going to equal placeholder image. And we're going to force unwrap that because we know this is actually in our bundle, right? Like if we were downloading this image from the internet, we would absolutely not force unwrap it because there's no guarantee we would have it. Once it's in our bundle, right? It's in our assets, it's going to be there. Again, there's always crazy edge cases where that may not be the case. I get it. For the sake of this, we're going to force unwrap it. So the last thing we need to do is the translates, the constraint thing. Again, it's a mouthful. I don't like saying it every time. Translates auto resizing mask into constraints. Set that equal to false. So again, we don't have to do that in the view controller. Get our spacing lined up, clean things up a bit. So now we have the beginnings of our GF avatar image view. So again, we're just configuring the corner radius. We're setting the clips to bounds. So the actual avatar image will also have a corner radius. We're setting it to a placeholder image, and then we're adjusting our constraint or masking into constraints to false. I say this is the beginnings of it because we're definitely going to revisit this class when it comes to actually downloading the avatars from the URL we have. So now that we have this custom image view, back to the follower cell, this is no longer a UI image view. This is a GF avatar image view. And then you have to initialize it with the frame, and we'll do .0. We can do .0 because we're going to be adjusting all this via constraints. So just like our other objects, we need our initializer methods. So call init, and we're init with frame. Same thing, super.init, we're going to pass in frame. And same thing we just did, right? It's going to yell at us. Let's go ahead and write our private func configure. Do a command B so Xcode yells at us. Like I want you to yell at me, Xcode, come on. Give us our storyboard initializer. And now we want to make sure we call configure in the init right there. I always like to do 2 vertical spaces between my variables, between my list of variables and my my init methods. Okay, so now we want to start typing out our configure, and all we're doing in this configure method is laying out our constraints. So before we do that, like the first thing we have to do, don't forget, add subview the avatar image view, and then add subview username label. Now I'm going to do this a little bit differently. If you remember in like the previous screens, remember how I would break out each one into its own function, right? Like I would have a configure avatar image view, layout to constraints. I would have a configure username label, layout to constraints. This is just personal preference. I'm not going to do that here because it's only 2 objects and I want to simplify it. This is one of those kind of gray areas where if there's a lot of items on the screen, I may break them down each individual configuration. If there's only 2, I'll probably just do that in the same function. There's really no hard and fast rule. It's just kind of like my thoughts, my style, my opinion, my preference. If you want to break them out, perfectly fine. If you want to combine them like I do, perfectly fine. So time for constraints. We haven't done constraints in a while. Let's get some practice. So ns layout constraint dot activate. And we want to pass in again, 4 constraints here. So the first one, now we're doing the avatar image view. So we want to do avatar image view dot, well, let's actually look at our design again real quick. You can kind of see in the cell, like the top of the image view is kind of like pinned to the top with a little bit of padding around the cell. Now, the interesting thing with this constraints is that the avatar image view, we always want it to be a square. So that's going to be the little twist we're going to put on this one here. So avatar image view dot top anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to the content view. Remember, all the cells have a content view. So content view dot top anchor. And the constant is going to be 8. we're going to do 8 all around. And actually, you know what, while we're here, because we're going to use 8 a lot, same thing, let padding equal, again, we got to tell it it's a CG float, or else it'll think it's an int or something. CG float equals 8. So now we want padding. And again, so we have the top anchor pinned 8 points from the top. And now we're going to do the left and right, the leading and trailing anchor with 8 padding as well. So avatar image view dot leading anchor dot constraint. Content view dot leading anchor, done. Constant is padding. We got to do commas here. I always forget that. We're passing in an array, so we got to do commas. And then avatar image view dot trailing anchor dot constraint equals content view dot trailing. And then if you remember, when you do trailing, it's got to be negative padding. And then now here's where this is a little bit different, right? Because we have our top, left, and right. So the left and right gives us our width, right? Based on how wide the cells are. And the way we're going to construct our collection view is like the width of the cell is going to be like based on like how wide the screen is, right? Like an iPhone SE screen is a lot skinnier than an iPhone Pro Max, right? So the width of the cell can vary. However, we always want the height to be equal to the width because we want it to be a square. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Avatar image view dot height anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to another anchor, and that's going to be avatar image view dot width anchor. And then they're not going to be constant, right? So we can just get rid of that. So that takes care of our avatar image view. And the next one is the username label. And again, like I said, I'm doing this a little bit differently, just like the overall layout, but it's all the same. It's really just a visual style, like which you prefer or how you want to compartmentalize your code. But I'm the username label dot top anchor dot constraint. Now for this one, again, if you look at the design, we're going to pin this to the bottom of the UI image view. So the GF avatar image view. Avatar image view dot bottom constraint, right, we're pinning it to the bottom. And the constant is going to be 12. And like I keep repeating this, but I have these numbers all dialed in. It took some trial and error to find out how it looked good. So that's one thing I want to talk about too, real quick, just a little side rants is I know when you're watching this, like it seems like I have it all figured out, which I do. Like I've already built the course. Just know when I was building this, there was so much trial and error, so much like tinkering, figuring things out. Remember, these videos are highly edited, you know what I mean? So I just want to be very clear to not give off the perception that in order to be a programmer, you just have to sit down and type code forever, not think about anything, just have everything memorized. Absolutely not the case. These things take time and trial and error to build. So with that little thing out of the way, now we're going to use our padding. So username label dot leading. We'll address that error here in a second. I'm not sure what's going on there. Dot leading anchor. Oh, we need a comma. That's what it's telling me. I couldn't unsee the error. Leading anchor dot constraint is going to be again equal to content view dot leading anchor, and again padding. I mean, another way, there's so many different ways to do these constraints. Like you could easily just make this equal to the width of the image view. I mean, there's so many different ways to do constraints. So I know if you have questions in the comments, like, could I do it this way? If it works, the answer is probably yes. Dot trailing anchor, like I said, so many different ways to do these. Dot constraint, content view, dot trailing anchor, again, negative padding. And now we just need a height on our label here. So username label dot height anchor dot constant or constraint equals to a constant, and that is going to be 20. Now, how I came up with 20 real quick, there's just a little side note here. So I'm passing in the font size of 16. So if I made my label height 16, there's letters that kind of hang down in the alphabet, right? The Y's, the G's, J. Couldn't think of that for a second. So if I made my label 16, the bottom part of those letters would get cut off and you wouldn't see it. So I always give my labels a little bit of padding, if you will, to account for the letters that kind of go below the baseline. So that's why we're doing height of 20 on our label. So let's make sure, we are calling configure right here. So we should be good to go on our table view cell. Well, at least for the layout, I forgot one thing. So this is the func I use to actually set this in the cell for item at index path kind of function. So I do set, and then it takes in a follower, and it is of type follower. So I'm going to explain this real quick right here. And then we're going to do, for now, just the username label dot text equals follower dot, follower dot, no, come on, follower dot log in. That's funny. Sorry, that made me laugh. I forgot to go back into our follower model and get rid of the gibberish we did on the when we intentionally broke our model. That's funny. Leaving that in. We're not editing that out. So follower.login, not okay. So this is also where we're going to set our avatar image view, but we're going to do that later. So basically what this function does when I call it, when I configure my cell, I'm going to say set follower. I'm going to pass in the follower that's at the index path, and it's going to yank out that follower's login and set the username label to that text. Again, later on, we'll set the avatar as well, but that's more involved than just setting a text field. So this wraps it up for our cell. Again, we laid everything out via the constraints, and then we set up the function that we're going to call to actually fill in some of the values here. And then as you can see on the screen, that's what the cell looks like, just to remind you, because we can't build it and run it to double check it. We'll see the fruits of our labor in a future video once we get our collection view all set up, which we're going to start tackling with collection view, diffable data source, the brand new hotness. We're going to start that next video. See you then.